Killers leave all kinds of evidence behind. Hair, clothing fibers, sometimes even weapons. But there are other kinds of evidence, signs of a criminal mind at work.
And what I've always said was, it was to understand the artist, you must look at the artwork.
It's called profiling, using research from convicted murderers and crime scene evidence to create a portrait of a killer.
Anyone can make the arrest, but I'm wanting to know really what makes them tick.
A common sense approach to detective work whose results can seem magical.
But it was just an uncanny prediction. It turned out to be exactly correct.
It's like the FBI people were on the other side watching this crime as it was occurring.
Atlanta, Georgia. Between January 1979 and May 1981, more than 200 murders occurred in and around the city. But the most troubling of these crimes were the mysterious deaths of 28 children and teenagers. It would be the nation's first major test of criminal profiling. July 28, 1979, police responded to a foul odor in a wooded area off Niskey Lake Road in Atlanta's predominantly black East Point section. Upon arrival, they found the body of 13-year-old Alfred Evans, who had been missing for 3 days. 150 feet away, police also discovered the partially decomposed body of 14-year-old Edward Smith, who had been reported missing for a week. Coroner's reports indicated that Evans had been strangled and that Smith had been shot with a .22 caliber weapon. Searching for suspects and information, police combed the housing projects where both Smith and Evans lived. They came up empty. 2 months later, 9-year-old Yusuf Bell, also from Atlanta's southwest side, was sent to the corner store near his home. He never arrived. On November 8th, police found Bell's body inside a classroom at an abandoned school. The boy had been strangled. Police still had no suspects and not enough evidence to link the crimes to one another. 5 months later, 9-year-old Jeffrey Mathis was sent with $1 to a nearby gas station where he was to buy cigarettes for his mother and return immediately home. An hour passed. 2 hours passed. Jeffrey's mother began to worry. Late that evening, she called the police and reported her youngest son missing. Just a few days earlier, she had warned him against speaking to strangers.
And he said, Mama said, I don't talk to strangers. I don't go to cars.
On April 15th, Mathis and Camille Bell announced they were banding together to publicize the murders of black children in Atlanta.
We are frustrated and we are frightened.
Over the next 2 months, 5 more victims were claimed. All young black children, all from poor neighborhoods. In mid-July, Mayor Maynard Jackson and Public Safety Commissioner Lee Brown announced the formation of a task force to investigate the possibility of a connection among the murders. The task force included the FBI. The murders presented the FBI with a unique opportunity to utilize a new and controversial investigative technique, criminal profiling. Special Agents John Douglas and Roy Hazelwood were dispatched to Atlanta. Their task, create a profile of the killer. Quickly, both agents established one likely fact about the unknown suspect.
I knew at that point in time that we were probably dealing with a black male, someone that could move comfortably through that environment without attracting attention.
For the special agent who had pioneered criminal profiling, this was the first chance to legitimize the technique as a valid investigative tool.
It was tough. It was a lot of pressure because had I screw up that analysis, the whole program could have went down the drain.
Working out of the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia, Douglas had made a name for himself by conducting field research on serial killers, research that would one day become the basis for the film Silence of the Lambs.
We go into the penitentiaries at nighttime and interview the subjects, and much to our surprise, they were very, very anxious to talk to us.
Over a 5-year period, Douglas and a colleague interviewed more than 30 of the country's most notorious serial killers, including Richard Speck, Charles Manson, and David, son of Sam, Berkowitz. Much of the questioning focused on each criminal's family life, childhood, and teenage years, looking for patterns of behavior and background. By the time Douglas and his colleague Roy Hazelwood got to Atlanta, the number of victims had risen to 16. From the beginning, Douglas was careful to tell the Atlanta police and task force officials that his profile would not solve the case by itself.
What I say is, I'm only offering you one little piece in the puzzle. I am not going to solve the case. You're going to solve the case. You got to do the hard work.
Both profilers visited the crime scenes of Evans, Smith, Milton Harvey, and victims Christopher Richardson and Earl Terrell.
There wasn't evidence to be gleaned from those scenes. It was more like, what type of area did the offender feel comfortable in abducting the children from? What type of area did the offender feel comfortable in disposing of the children?
By February, 3 more victims had been claimed. 15-year-olds Terry Pugh, Patrick Rogers, and 14-year-old Luby Jeter. The list of missing and murdered children now numbered 19. Then, on February 13th, the news that Jeffrey Mathis's family had been dreading. Task force members found the remains of the boy in a wooded area up nearby Rockdale County. He had been missing for nearly a year.
I was already relieved. I was relieved knowing that he was dead and in good care with Jesus Christ at 10 years old.
After 3 weeks of investigation, the FBI agents issued their profile.
The principal profile was a black male in his early to mid-20s, a police buff who was living in this community.
The findings were met with skepticism. Atlanta police officers, many of them black, became outraged when they found out the criminal profile pointed to a black male as the prime suspect.
The police said, "Hey, John," he says, in fact, "Hey, Douglas, we saw your profile. It's a bunch of BS."
Police soon had another important tool to help focus their investigation. Hair and fiber evidence pulled from the bodies of at least 10 of the victims were similar enough to assure investigators that the murders were connected. To John Douglas, the hair and fiber evidence was a sign of how physically close the killer got to his victims.
The unknown subject had some kind of relationship. He was coming in contact with these kids. At some point, he snaps and he decides to kill them.
Douglas also predicted that the next group of victims would be found near water.
The medical examiner came forward and was basically boasting that we were getting very good evidence. We were getting this hair and fiber evidence off of the bodies, and what we suspected and felt was that a good way to wash away that evidence is to dump the bodies in water.
Over the next 3 months, a total of 9 more victims would be found. 7 of them in the Chattahoochee and South rivers. All of the victims, like many of the previous 19, had been strangled. The task force now set up round-the-clock stakeouts of every bridge along both rivers. After nearly 2 weeks of surveillance, with no suspects and no more bodies found in the rivers, task force officials gave the order to shut down the stakeouts, effective at 6 a.m. on May 22nd. At 2:30 that same morning, a police cadet working an area of northwest Atlanta near the James Jackson Parkway Bridge heard a splash. He raced to the top of the bridge and pulled over a 1970 Chevrolet station wagon. He questioned the driver briefly, then let him go. The driver's name, Wayne Bertram Williams. After police had spotted Wayne Williams on this Atlanta bridge in May 1981, the FBI agents began studying his background to see whether he fit their profile. He did. The profilers had predicted the perpetrator would be a police buff, someone who gained access to his victims by impersonating a police officer. The 23-year-old Williams had been arrested 5 years earlier for impersonating a cop. A neighbor of the Williams family told the FBI that kids still thought Williams was a policeman because he carried a badge. Born and raised on Atlanta's southeast side, Williams was an only child who still lived in the same house where he had grown up with his schoolteacher parents. Locally, he had made a name for himself as a record promoter and talent scout. He placed flyers around his neighborhood, recruiting teenagers to audition for him. 3 days after Williams was pulled over, another strangled body was discovered floating along the banks of the Chattahoochee, about 1 mile from the bridge. It was 27-year-old Nathaniel Cater, a borderline retarded man from Atlanta's east side. Police now made it known that they considered Williams their prime suspect, but did not yet have enough evidence to arrest him. They placed him under tight surveillance. For the next month, his every move was recorded by Atlanta police, the FBI, and the media. The murder spree came to a sudden halt. In early June, police obtained a search warrant for the Williams home. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation was called in to search for matching hair and fiber evidence. 3 weeks later, based on a positive match of hair and clothing fibers from the Williams home to 12 of the victims, police arrested Williams for the murders of Jimmy Ray Payne and Nathaniel Cater. For the FBI profilers, the arrest was a vindication of a new program which many people within the Bureau regarded as hocus pocus.
It felt tremendous, and really not so much as an individual, because I wanted the program to succeed. I felt this was a viable investigative tool that could not be a substitute for an investigation, but can enhance an investigation.
And enhance a prosecution. The Fulton County DA's office requested a second profile of Williams to help them plot their courtroom strategy. Douglas portrayed Williams as an angry young man seeking power who wears a mask to cover his personal inadequacies. He challenged authorities, intimidated them, and almost played out his own script. For his part, Williams had hired one of the best defense teams in the South, including former Georgia Solicitor General Mary Welcome.
Now, Richard, my client is innocent. He did not kill anyone.
I think Wayne began to realize, hey, this is kind of serious here. And I can understand from his perspective. I didn't do it. And I'm just going to sit back and wait for them to find out for themselves that I didn't do it.
When the trial began in late December, prosecutors leaned heavily on the hair and fiber evidence retrieved from Williams' car and home, which matched fibers on the murder victims.
But to me, that's the strength of it. It was as strong as leaving a physical item to me that says this is from the Williams home.
But to FBI profiler John Douglas, who was seated right behind the prosecution table, it looked like the jury was losing interest in the complicated details.
Our experts were, I think, at times way too technical. They said, I think you guys are losing the case.
With the trial still underway, Douglas returned to the FBI Academy in Virginia, but not before making another prediction.
During the trial, he leaned over to me and he said, 1 week from today, Williams is going to fake illness. And I said, John.
Why? And he says, because they're beginning to lose this case, and it's going to be a sympathy ploy on his part.
Exactly 1 week to the day after the prediction, Wayne Williams was rushed to Grady Memorial Hospital, complaining of chest pains. Doctors found no medical problem. Douglas, at home in Virginia when he heard the news, was called back a second time to help prosecutors.
So now it's like E.F. Hutton, that this guy, however he's doing, we don't understand it, but he's predicting things that are taking place before our eyes.
The profiler predicted that Williams would take the stand in his own defense.
John said very early, a team of wild horses couldn't keep him off the stand. He's going to take the stand.
Reluctantly, on February 22nd, Defense attorney Mary Welcome called Wayne Williams to testify.
We said, Wayne, what they're going to try to do is to make you angry. You can't be angry. You've got to be calm, but you cannot be emotionless either.
When it came time for Assistant DA Jack Mallard to begin his cross-examination, he was armed with some valuable advice from John Douglas.
And he suggested that I keep him on the stand as long as possible, that he might break sooner or later. And finally, the last day, the third day on the stand, he came out doing battle.
Up to that point, through 2 days of cross-examination, Williams had remained calm, his demeanor never shaken. On the third day, Douglas suggested that the prosecutor try a new approach.
I said, what you have to do, Jack, is you have to, at some point, violate his body space. I want you to grab his hands and, at some point, whisper in a low voice, what was it like, Wayne, when you wrapped your fingers around one of the victims' throats? Did you panic, Wayne? Mallard got very, very close. He was blocking out the defense attorneys on the side. The judge could hardly hear him. The jurors could hear him. And what he said was, what was it like, Wayne, when you wrapped your fingers around Terry Pugh's throat? Did you panic? And he said in a weak voice, no.
Realizing he had just admitted involvement in a murder, Williams shot back at the prosecutor. You're trying to make me fit that FBI profile, but you're not going to do it.
And then you look at the jurors, and the jurors, their mouths are wide open. And they saw that this person has this propensity for violence for the very first time.
A courtroom sensation based on insight from a criminal profile.
What Wayne gave them was just another cog in this profile wheel that they were constructing. And they needed that rage, because rage is a necessary part of killing.
Williams' defense team never recovered from the 1-2 punch of hair and fiber evidence and the outburst in the courtroom. On February 27, 1982, the jury found Williams guilty of both Payne and Cater's murders and sentenced him to 2 life terms in prison. In 1983, Williams began a lengthy appeal, accusing prosecutors of covering up information that the Ku Klux Klan was involved in at least 2 of the murders. On July 10, 1998, a judge denied his appeal. Anchorage, Alaska, 1983. The disappearance of 14 young women cast a dark shadow over the 49th state. June 12th, with the scenic Chugach Mountains as a backdrop, prostitutes and drug dealers were making their usual rounds in the city's red light district. A 19-year-old prostitute was working her corner of 5th and Denali Streets. A man approached and offered her $300 for oral sex. She agreed. He took her back to his house in the upper-middle-class Muldoon neighborhood and raped her. He then chained her to a basement pillar and went to sleep. The next morning, June 13th, 5 a.m. A clear, quiet morning at Anchorage's Merrill Field. Local pilots were arriving, hoping to take advantage of the nearly 20 hours of daylight. The night before, the kidnapper had told the prostitute they were going to his cabin in the mountains. As they drove to the airport, she planned her escape. She would jump from the car before they boarded the plane. High heels in hand, she jumped and ran barefoot from the car and toward 5th Avenue. He ran after and yelled, "I'll kill you, I'll kill you." An Anchorage police officer tracked the woman down at a local motel and took her statement about the abduction and rape. He brought the prostitute back to the airport. She walked up and down the rows of small planes but was unable to identify the aircraft. As they were walking, a security guard who had been on duty told the officer that he had seen a man running from the nearby woods and getting into a green vehicle. The officer contacted the police dispatch unit, who told him that the car was owned by Robert Hansen of 7224 Old Harbor Road in Anchorage. Hansen was a prominent citizen, married, the father of 2 children, and the owner of a bakery downtown. When questioned about why he was at the airport so early, he told officers that he and 2 friends were working on his airplane late into the night, and that with the plentiful daylight, they had lost track of time. A few days later, Anchorage police dropped the case.
No, he's not arrested. It was possibly a hooker who had been not paid for a trick by a local businessman out on a night with the boys, and that she was getting back at him for not paying her.
For Officer Greg Baker, the case was anything but closed.
Well, we had an ongoing problem before this happened regarding missing dancers.
The dancers, 14 women, all reported missing. The story was almost always the same. One of the girls, like 27-year-old Sue Luna, would tell a friend that she would be meeting someone who had offered her a lot of money for a sexual encounter. She would attend the initial meeting and never be heard from again. Officer Baker took all of the records on the Hansen case and turned them over to the Alaska State Troopers, who were handling the investigation of the missing dancers. Trooper Glenn Flothy had been pursuing the case since the body of 23-year-old dancer Sherry Morrow was found in this wooded area along the Knik River, 50 miles northeast of Anchorage, in 1981. In July 1983, 2 hunters discovered the body of Paula Golding, also an exotic dancer. The remote location of her body was accessible only by airplane. Hansen was the only one of a handful of suspects who had a pilot's license.
And then as we dug a little farther into his criminal background, it became even more apparent that if we did not move quickly to put a stop to him, that he would probably kill again.
Robert Hansen came to Alaska from Minnesota in 1970. Not long after his arrival, he opened a bakery. He was featured in a 1982 local newscast. He had a trademark stutter that most customers and friends recognized as an embarrassment for him. A closer look into Hansen's background revealed personal demons that haunted him from his teenage years. An arrest at 18 for arson, jail time in 1972 for assaulting a woman in downstate Seward, and a 5-year sentence in 1977 for larceny. He was paroled in 1978. With the discovery of the Anchorage police report, Flothy was convinced that the only way to secure evidence was to serve a surprise search warrant on the Hansen home. Little did the trooper know that an FBI profile would hold the key to not only securing the warrant, but to the mystery behind Robert Hansen. After being denied cooperation to file a search warrant from the Anchorage District Attorney's Office, Flothy remembered an article he read in Psychology Today magazine on the FBI's profiling unit. He called the FBI Academy at Quantico and requested the profiling unit. The trooper talked to profiler Roy Hazelwood. After outlining the purpose of his call, he began to tell Hazelwood about his suspect, Robert Hansen.
And he goes, no, stop. He said, I don't want to know anything about the suspect right now. You tell me about the victims, and let me tell you about the suspect.
Because if you give us any information about a suspect, then we're going to be impacted by that. We're human beings.
The trooper told Hazelwood about the body dump sites and the missing dancers, and about the prostitute who escaped. He told the profiler about a pair of .223 caliber shells found at the Goulding and Morrow body sites. After only 10 minutes of discussion over the phone, Hazelwood began outlining a profile.
He was very comfortable with the outdoors. We were convinced of that. He was very comfortable with the environment in which he disposed of the bodies. We were convinced of that. The fact that he was a hunter doesn't take a genius to figure that out.
And a couple of things that he mentioned, quite frankly, startled me. He said this individual may stutter. Robert Hansen did, in fact, have a stutter.
The trooper believed the phoned-in profile would be more than enough information to obtain a search warrant. But to bolster his case further, he requested on-site profiling. John Douglas made the trip to Alaska.
This person here was a real asocial type. He had this speech impediment. He had a very poor self-image. He had to pick victims like prostitutes who really had to have the gift to gab, because he doesn't have to have the gift to gab.
On September 16th, 1983, with the FBI profile in hand, Flothi went to the district attorney to request his help in securing a search warrant. He was denied a second time. The trooper took matters into his own hands, preparing the necessary affidavit. For nearly 3 straight days, Flothi wove the FBI profile, the physical evidence, and Hansen's criminal background into a request to search Hansen's home, car, bakery, and aircraft. Based in part on Hazelwood and Douglas's profile, a judge now granted the warrant. The next day, Flothi led the search of Hansen's home and car. Nearly everything that the profilers had said would be in Hansen's house appeared. Profilers were again right on the money. They found hunting paraphernalia, a cache of guns, disguise kits, and jewelry that belonged to several of the missing dancers. Authorities took Hansen in for additional questioning. Once again, he denied any knowledge of the killings, and by day's end was only charged with the kidnapping and rape of the prostitute on June 13th. In February 1984, hoping to spare his family a trial, Hansen offered to give some information about the victims, but stopped short of confessing to the murders. But there was one piece of evidence that Hansen did not know about.
During the search, we also uncovered several flight maps. And when we looked at the map and compared the location of several of the X's to the known locations of bodies already found, they matched perfectly.
Hansen knew his long criminal road was over. He confessed to a total of 17 murders over a 3-year period. Using the map found in his home, Hansen led police to the remote body sites of 14 additional victims. For his crimes, Hansen was sentenced to life plus 461 years in the Alaska State Penitentiary. Lexington, South Carolina. For high school senior Sherry Faye Smith, May 31st, 1985, should have been one of the happiest days of her young life. She was on her way home from a local shopping center to change clothes, then off to a rehearsal for graduation ceremonies. She pulled into her driveway, stopping to get the mail. A few minutes later, her father, who had seen the car pull up, went outside to greet his daughter. He walked to the end of the long driveway. He noticed Sherry's car empty, the engine running, and the driver's door open. Her purse was on the front seat. He called police. Lexington County Sheriff James Metz was one of the first to arrive.
So we immediately went out there, started getting some background information, was able to find some people who had seen Sherry pull into the driveway and a car come by slowly.
Within 24 hours, friends, neighbors, and schoolmates came together to search for Sherry. Because of the Smith family's prominence in the community, Lexington became a city focused on one goal: finding Sherry Faye Smith. The next day, June 1st, after an exhaustive day-long search of an area near the shopping mall, police were left with no leads. The Smith family went to bed early, hoping to resume the search the next morning. At 2 a.m. on June 2nd, the phone rang. Sherry's mother, Hilda, answered the call.
On the other end is an individual who sounds like he's disguised his voice in some way, and he was letting her know that Sherry was with him.
Police began taping the conversations with the kidnapper, hoping to trace the calls. The sheriff made frequent trips to the Smith home, sometimes talking to the abductor himself. During one of the conversations, the sheriff challenged the kidnapper to come up with some proof that he was holding Sherry hostage.
He said, "I will send you something. You will get something in the mail that will confirm that this is no hoax, that I am telling you the truth."
On Sunday, the sheriff contacted the town's postmaster and found a letter awaiting delivery at the local post office. The letter, a chilling goodbye from Sherry Faye Smith to her family. In it, she told each family member she loved them and said, "Please do not become hard or upset. Everything works out for the best for those who love the Lord. Even after receiving the letter, the Smith family still held out hope that she was alive.
We just want to simply say that whoever it is that has our daughter Sherry, we want her back. We miss her. We love her. And please send her back home where she belongs.
But for Sherry's abductor, the game was far from over. The kidnapper knew that Sherry was a water diabetic and kept her family's hopes alive by talking about her medical condition.
Can you answer me one question, please? Can you tell me, is she all right physically without her medicine?
Sherry is drinking a little over 2 gallons of water per hour.
2 days later, Wednesday, June 5th, the kidnapper calls again, this time with directions.
Take Highway 378 west to Traffic Circle. Take Prosperity exit. Go 1.5 miles. Turn right at sign. Moose Lodge number 103. Go 1/4 mile. Turn left at white frame building. Go to backyard. 6 feet beyond, we're waiting. God chose us.
Until the phone conversation where he gave directions, the kidnapper had led the family to believe that Sherry was still alive. The body of Sherry Faye Smith was found behind the white building. She had been strangled to death. An autopsy report later showed that she had been left there for at least 4 days. For Sheriff Metz, the answer became clear. This was a different type of criminal that he had experienced in his career. He also knew where to turn for an additional investigative tool.
I understood what profiling was all about, and I knew that it could be helpful to us. I knew it may not be the cure-all, but it could give us information based on evidence and the way people acted.
The sheriff contacted the local FBI office and requested the assistance of the profilers. The help came in the form of John Douglas and Special Agent Jim Wright. The agents listened to the tapes that had been made of the kidnapper's phone calls. By this point, the kidnapper had called the Smith home 3 more times, each time talking to Sherry's sister, Dawn Smith.
And it was very, very, very difficult to want to just scream and yell and cry, and knowing I could not do that because now I had to no longer worry about finding Sherry, but worry about keeping this man on the phone long enough for him to be caught.
From the phone conversations, as well as crime scene photos and a review of Sherry Smith's background, Douglas and Wright created a profile of a white male, shy and polite to strangers. He would be overweight and considered unattractive to women. Drawing on his experience interviewing serial killers, Douglas figured he would be a meticulous person, since many of his phone calls to the Smith home recounted very specific times and dates. Douglas believed he would be following news reports of the murders. He also told Sherry's father not to fear an additional kidnapping of his other daughter, Dawn.
This was not the type of serial killer that would be pulling into your driveway and killing your second daughter. This guy's a real coward.
Then the phone calls stopped. For over a week, as the Smith family grieved over the loss of Sherry, their only source of communication with their daughter's murderer seemed to be cut off. June 14th, 1985, 9 days after Sherry Smith's body was found, 9-year-old Deborah Helmick was abducted from her front yard in the trailer park where she lived in neighboring Richland County. With a murder and now an abduction on his hands, the South Carolina sheriff requested the FBI's on-scene help in the investigation. John Douglas made the trip to South Carolina. 1 week later, the killer called again. Dawn Smith took the call.
Have you heard about Deborah May Hamrick, the 10-year-old? H-E-L-M-I-C-K?
Richland County?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay, listen carefully. Go 1 west, turn left at Peach Festival Road, go 50 yards, and to the left, Deborah May is waiting. God forgive us all.
The directions were to the body of little Deborah May Helmick. What began as the case of a single abduction had now turned into an investigation of a double murder. As Lexington residents reacted to the killings, it would be Sherry's own last will and testament and the criminal profile that would help solve both cases. Police had been working with a South Carolina crime laboratory and doing tests on the paper on which Sherry Smith had written her last letter. Technicians used a machine designed to pick up impressions left by pens and pencils from sheets that had been in a notepad. They detected a grocery list and what seemed to be a phone number.
And so when he made her sign the last will and testament, he ripped off that page or two, so to the naked eye it looked like a clean sheet of paper. But when it was processed, they came up with this indented writing, all but one digit.
Using the phone number as their guide, police followed a trail of evidence, ultimately leading to the home of Ellis and Sharon Shepard, who lived in nearby Saluda County. Sheriff's deputies raced to the Shepard home to find that not only did the couple not fit the profile, but had been out of state on vacation when the two murders occurred. So police read the profile to the Shepards. They told the couple about the unknown subject's weight, his likely problems with women, and about the subject's meticulous nature. Ellis and Sharon Shepard looked at each other and uttered the same name, Larry Jean Bell. The criminal profile created to help solve the murders of two South Carolina girls had led police to a man who had been house-sitting for a local couple, Ellis and Sharon Shepard, when the crimes occurred. His name, Larry Jean Bell. FBI profilers John Douglas and Jim Wright predicted to Lexington County, South Carolina Sheriff James Metz that the murderer would be in his 30s, would have failed, possibly violent relationships in his past, and would likely have a lot of flexibility in his job. They said he would probably have an arrest record. Bell was in his 30s and occasionally worked as an electrician. He had been arrested for making harassing phone calls in 1979.
So everything about the criminal profile fit only one person, Larry Jean Bell. The age matched, the fact that he would be extremely neat matched in his room, everything was just precisely in place in his vehicle, everything was as neat as a pin.
The day after Bell's name surfaced, deputies searched the Shepard home. After finding hair samples that matched victim Sherry Smith, Sheriff Metz issued a warrant for Bell's arrest. Sheriff's deputies arrested him on June 27th.
I am innocent. I've been justly...
From jail, Bell requested a meeting with Sherry Smith's sister, Dawn. She went to the police station and sat down with Bell in an interview room. Immediately, she recognized his voice.
I can just remember the feeling as if it were yesterday. Oh my gosh, this is the man. You know, this is the man that killed Sherry. I can't believe I'm sitting in a room with him.
Police questioned Bell for nearly 12 hours, but got nowhere. Again, police would use the profile to trap Larry Jean Bell, fortified by a secret weapon. Profiler John Douglas was still in South Carolina when Bell was arrested. Sheriff Metz, who had been questioning the suspect, had grown tired of his rambling denial. Metz wanted to let the profiler interview Larry Jean Bell. In a highly unusual move, the sheriff introduced Bell to the man whose criminal profile had led to his arrest.
And he says, you know, they did a profile you that fits you right to a T, right down to everything about you.
Drawing on his years of profiling experience, Douglas interviewed Bell.
And I sit on the edge of the table and I said, you know, a lot of people don't understand the criminal personality. But one of the things I found is that in my research, sometimes there's like two sides of one's personality. I found there's been a good side and a bad side, almost like a multiple personality. And after they perpetrate the crime, this one side isn't even aware of this bad side.
The suspect paused for a moment. Then he spoke. He told the profiler that, quote, the good Larry Jean Bell could never have done this. but the bad Larry Gene Bell could very well have committed these crimes. Based on the evidence found at the Shepherd home and the incriminating statements made in his interview with Douglas, Bell went on trial for the murder of Sherry Faye Smith in January 1986. Prosecutor Donnie Myers, impressed with the profiler's work during the investigation, wanted Douglas back in South Carolina during the trial to help with prosecution strategy. The profiler, knowing Bell was using an insanity defense, made an offhand prediction about his courtroom behavior.
I asked John, what do you think Bell will do the first time that I bring him into court? John told me, he'll cause a disturbance. There'll be an outburst. The first time we'll bring Bell into court is an outburst.
As he had done in the trial of Wayne Williams 4 years later, Douglas agreed to provide advice to the prosecution in the Bell case. Nearly 3 weeks later, a jury found Larry Gene Bell guilty of the murder of Sherry Smith. In March 1987, he was convicted of Deborah Helmick's murder. He was sentenced to death. After 2 appeals, he was executed in 1996. The cases of Larry Gene Bell, Robert Hansen, and Wayne Williams have become textbook cases of how profiling can work. Local police departments are now routinely trained in the technique. Many city and state police agencies have their own profiler on staff. It is a trend that worries John Douglas.
This isn't name that tune. I could become a profiler in 3 beats. I mean, the training that my own people go through is 2 years.
It is a simple idea, really, using deductive reasoning and basic clues to create a portrait of a killer.
There's no such thing as profile A for this type of murder, profile B for this type of murder. The art of profiling depends greatly upon the human mind. It depends greatly upon human experience. It depends upon common sense. And you use your common sense to arrive at, quote, a profile of the unidentified offender, end quote.